Welcome to Hack Your Menstrual Cycle Masterclass. I'm so excited to share this information with you today because it's something that I wish I learned earlier on. And it's also great information for anyone who wants to be proactive when it comes to their health, or simply anyone who wants to become more in tune with their body or their menstrual cycle. So I'm really excited to share this information with you today. And so in this masterclass, we're going to be going over the 5 hacks plus a bonus hack at the end. And to get started, I want to first introduce myself, but I'm going to keep it short and sweet because just to warn you, this masterclass is a long one. It's worth it, but it is a long one. So I'm going to keep my intro short and sweet. So hi, I'm Odilia. I'm a nutritionist. I have my undergrad in nutrition. I also have my master's in clinical nutrition. I'm also a certified nutrition specialist, which requires a master's as well as 1,000 supervised hours and then passing the board exam. I'm also licensed in Maryland. I'm a strength coach, so a personal trainer, and I'm also founder of Femtility. And I've been working with women for the past 5 years, and I love it. So I started as a strength coach, weight loss coach, helping women with their emotional eating, and now I work more in a clinical setting. And so I'm really excited to share the information that I've learned just through my education and then my experience working with different women and also my own health experience with you today. And so let's get started. So if you ever have any questions or if you ever want to send me a message or just say hi, I love that. So feel free to do so. I'm very friendly. But let's get started. So Hack Your Menstrual Cycle Masterclass. So a quick note, if you're on hormonal birth control, this masterclass will still be super beneficial, but it's more tailored towards those who are not on hormonal birth control. But if you're on hormonal birth control, it's just a little different. So you're getting synthetic hormones versus your body making certain hormones. And of course, it depends on which birth control you're on. But I just want to make that quick note. Also, if you're someone who wants to get off birth control, there's ways that you can prep your body so you can avoid those post-pill symptoms, which the most common ones include acne, losing your period, PMS, or pill-induced PCOS. And so I also want to note here, because I love helping women plan ahead, is that if you're someone who wants to potentially start a family in a few years and you got on hormonal birth control to help regulate your symptoms, something to be mindful of is that if you get off birth control, there's a good chance that you're going to go back to or experience the symptoms that you experienced before. And why I say this is because sometimes women will be on birth control for 5, 10 plus years. They get off birth control and then they struggle to conceive. And it's not necessarily that the birth control itself caused infertility issues. Sometimes it's mainly because there was an issue before. And so the woman got on hormonal birth control and never addressed the root cause. So when she got off birth control, she then has to address the root cause. And that can just add or shift the timeline when someone wants to get pregnant. So I just want to share that in case that's where you're at or if you want to plan ahead. And if you have any questions on this specific topic, I'd be more than happy to create another masterclass around this topic. So definitely let me know. So hack number 1 is called menstrual cycle mastery. So in order to hack your menstrual cycle and your health, we really need to understand our menstrual cycle. So that's what this hack is all about. So learning about our cycle. So with our menstrual cycle, we have 2 specific phases. We have the follicular phase and then the luteal phase. The follicular phase is the first half of your cycle. The luteal phase is the second half. And with the follicular phase, this is the phase that can vary in length depending on a woman's situation. So for most women, stress or lack of sleep can cause their ovulation to be pushed back or sometimes happen a little sooner, but usually if it's pushed back, then the luteal phase doesn't start until a little later, making the cycle a little bit longer. So if you're someone who has very regular cycles, you may notice that you ovulate around the same time. But if you're someone who does not have regular cycles, meaning maybe sometimes your cycle is 28 days, sometimes it's 35 days, sometimes then it goes shorter, longer, you really want to address what's going on. Because in order to enter that luteal phase, we need to ovulate because our body will actually create an organ to help produce that progesterone. And with the luteal phase, it's always going to be roughly around 12 to 16 days. So if you get pregnant, it's going to sustain the pregnancy. If you don't get pregnant, then you start all over again. So I want to share this because we have 2 specific phases, but it can feel a little confusing because online you may hear individuals talk about the 4 different phases of your menstrual cycle. And that's because there's different fluctuations in hormones. So you can break down these 2 specific phases into 4 phases. But I just want to note that we technically only have 2 phases. So the follicular phase is really all about preparing your body for ovulation. The luteal phase is preparing for pregnancy if you get pregnant. So we have these 2 phases. But I want to talk about the 4 different phases because we do have these hormone shifts. So we can technically break it down. So with the 4 different phases, we have menstruation, follicular, ovulation, and luteal phase. And just to keep things simple, I'm going to be using a 28-day cycle. But just note that if your cycle is a little shorter or longer, the time frame of these different phases will vary based off you and your cycle specifically. but I'm going to use a 28-day cycle. So with menstruation, roughly that's around 2 to 7 days, and the start of your cycle is day 1. And then you enter the follicular phase, which is roughly a week. And then you enter ovulation, which is around 5 days. Even though you only ovulate once a month, so you can only technically get pregnant once a month, but sperm can live inside a female body for up to 5 days. And so that's why that ovulation phase is around 5 days. So if you want to get pregnant, this is the time that you want to time your intercourse. If you don't want to get pregnant, this is the time you want to avoid that sexy time. And then you enter the luteal phase, which is always around 12 to 16 days. And these are the 4 different phases. So really what's going on is these hormonal shifts. And that's why we can break it down to those 4 phases. And so I want to share this so you can visually see the hormone shifts. So when we're on our period, so day 1, our hormones are at the lowest. And we're mainly going to look at the red and gold line here. So estrogen, progesterone. So our hormones are low. So this is why it's common to hear that your menstrual cycle, or your period, is that winter time of your cycle, because it's common to want to be alone. It's common to want to hibernate. And that's because your hormones are at the lowest. And then as you enter that follicular phase, your hormones will slowly start to rise. So you may notice that your energy also starts to rise. And that's why it's also common for this phase to be known as that springtime. And then you enter ovulation. So the hormones are peaking. So you feel more social. You want to do things. This is considered that summertime. And then you enter the luteal phase, which depending on the first half, I feel like you can break this one down into like first half, second half, but you really want to execute. You want to get things done. And this is more of that fall time energy, preparing for winter. And then you do it all over again. So this is why we can break it down into those 4 phases. And knowing this, you can actually take advantage of these hormonal shifts. So with our cycle, when we're on our period, this is a great time to reflect, spend time with ourselves. When we enter that follicular phase, it's a great time to get organized or take on those creative projects. When we're ovulating, it's a great time to schedule those business meetings or those social events or just be around people. And when you enter the luteal phase, this is a great time to execute, get things done. So if you're able to shift your cycle or your schedule around, I should say, not your cycle, but if you're able to shift your schedule around these phases to align with where you're going to be at, it can help you just feel better. So if you know you're about to start your period and there's a lot of social things going on, it may not be helpful to schedule something intense around your period if you're someone who tends to want to just hang out by themselves. But if you know that you have a business meeting coming up and you have flexibility, schedule that around that late follicular ovulation phase when you are going to want to be social and be more active. That's a great time. And so that's just one way that you can take advantage of your hormonal shifts. Another thing I want to talk about is our hormones and libido, because I commonly hear women say things like, I don't know why sometimes I don't want to have sex. Is there something wrong with me? And really it could just be that you're in a specific phase of your cycle. So with our hormones, it's natural to have fluctuations on when we want to have sex. So when we're on our actual period, some women have an increased desire, but for most women, they don't want to have sex. As you enter the follicular phase, you may notice that you have an increased desire. When we're on our ovulation phase, that's when we want to have sex the most. So you may notice that you find your partner more attractive or just random strangers more attractive. And that's because we are ovulating. So our body wants to reproduce, and that's around ovulation. And then the luteal phase, you may notice that slowly as you enter that cycle or the end of that cycle, you have a decreased want to have sex. So it's totally normal. So it really depends on where you're at and other factors. So I'm just talking about the different phases, but of course there's different factors like stress, lack of sleep, things like that. So that's just something to be mindful of. Just asking yourself, why do I want to have sex? Sometimes maybe you're just about to start your period, and that's okay. And why I share that is because men and women are different. And so I just want to share the difference here so you can visually see. And so with men, they have a 24-hour cycle, and we have that month-long cycle. So for men, technically, their day-to-day is the same, so their weeks the same, their months are the same. So overall, they feel the same every single day. Of course, there's specific situations where maybe there's stress or depending on their health. But for the most part, their hormones stay the same. They have a 24-hour cycle. And they mainly have to worry about testosterone and cortisol. Yes, we both, men and women, have different hormones, but right now I just want you to know that for them, they mainly have to focus on that testosterone. And I did include cortisol. Us women, we have that as well. But for men, with their 24-hour cycle, they wake up, their testosterone is the lowest. It increases, spikes middle of the day, and then slowly declines before they go to bed. And that repeats itself. With cortisol, for men and women, we have that spike right when we wake up, which is beneficial. It's called the cortisol awakening response. And then it slowly declines. So for men, it's normal for them to be able to do the same things every day. And just a side note, the work environment was created for men. So it's normal for them to do the same thing Monday through Friday. Versus us women, sometimes it's challenging because if we're about to start a period, we may not be as motivated and things like that. So I just want you to visually see that we are not the same as men. This doesn't mean that we're doomed and men are better, not at all. It's more so just understanding your body so you can be more gentle with yourself if you need to be more gentle, and just understanding where you're at. So I want to share a client experience just so you can see the benefits of actually tracking your cycle and understanding what's going on. So my client Amber, what she had to say is, since I started keeping a regular track of my menstrual cycle with the guidance of Adelia, my life has truly turned around. With her insights, I've become more intentional about scheduling important tasks like presentations and creative projects during my peak energy and focus days in the cycle. This awareness has transformed how I approach my business and also balancing the rest of my life. I'm now more in tune with myself, and I'm also learning more about my hormones with Odelia to prep for pregnancy. So excited to have her on my team as I continue this journey. So if you really take time to understand your cycle and be more in tune, you can shift, if you're able to, how you approach your day to day. All right, so now let's go over hack number 2, which is called Cycle Savvy Navigator. So in order to take advantage of hack number 1, we want to start to track our cycle. We need to start to see what is going on. So that's what hack number 2 is all about. And so just a quick note that there is a difference between menstrual cycle awareness and charting for fertility awareness method. So with menstrual cycle awareness, this involves recording when you start your period and any emotional or physical symptoms you may experience throughout your cycle. And usually women use a period tracking app, versus fertility awareness method does use the menstrual cycle awareness, but it also adds in other fertility biomarkers, which include shifts in your body temperature, positioning of your cervix, and also cervical mucus consistency. So depending on your goals or where you're at, using maybe just the menstrual cycle awareness to start is a great option. It's most popular because with the apps, you can track when you start your period. You can start to notice any fluctuations on your cycle lengths, any symptoms that you may experience. But if you want to get more in-depth information, or if you're someone who wants to conceive in the future, I highly recommend learning how to use the fertility awareness method, regardless if you want to use this as actual birth control or not, just because you get a lot more insight. And I'll share a graph so you can, or charting example so you can see the difference, so you can see if maybe that's something you want to learn more about. And if it is something you want to learn more about, definitely let me know. I'd be more than happy to create another masterclass around this specific topic. But to get started, what we want to do is we need to explore the different apps. There's so many tracking apps out there. I create a list so you can feel free to look at the ones I recommend, but there's so many out there. So what you want to do is explore different apps, download them, see which one feels better for you or which one you like the most, familiarize yourself with it, and then stay consistent. You want to track for 3 to 6 months at least to start to notice any patterns. And so let's go over the different period tracking apps. So for me, I love Kendra just because it is more of that fertility awareness method type tracking app, but also because my clients can add me as practitioner, so then I can see their charts. But another favorite is Fertility Friend or Read Your Body. And so why I recommend, if you're open to it, to going straight into learning about the fertility awareness method for tracking is because we can get a lot more information, like I said. So here's an example. So depending on the app that you use, it will look a little different, but this is taken from the Fertility Friend app. And they'll look roughly the same. It's just, how it's presented slightly different. So what's cool about tracking using the fertility awareness method is that you can learn about when you ovulate. Also, you can learn things like the length of your luteal phase. Because if you're someone who wants to conceive, and let's just say you start to track and you notice that your luteal phase is too short, then it will be very hard to sustain a pregnancy. So it can just give us insight into, are you ovulating too early, too late, your luteal phase, things like that. And regardless, like I said, if you want to actually use this as birth control or not, I just think it's helpful. And then you can also track your cervical mucus, your cervix positioning, and things like that. So when you do want to do the fertility awareness method, you would want to get a specific thermometer. So it's a basal body temperature thermometer. So it is different than a standard one that you would just buy like at CVS. And they're not expensive unless you want to do one of the expensive ones. So unless you want to do a Bluetooth one, those ones can be like $200 or more. So those can be pricey. But you can get a simple one off Amazon for like $10. That's what I use. And you can track your temperature and then you can see these fluctuations. And so if you want to use the fertility awareness method, I highly recommend you start to learn now how to use it, just because it does show you when you start your period. It does show you the same things that you would see on a normal tracking app, but you can get more in-depth information, like I said. And so here's a list of apps that you can download that are very popular or that I've had clients say that they love. So here's a list that you can try and explore the different options. So now let's talk about hack number 3, which is called Nourish Your Cycle's Rhythms. So with this hack, we can learn how to modify our diet to align with the different phases or fluctuations of our hormones throughout the month. So with this hack, you don't have to do anything drastic. It's more so learning how to add in certain foods to support our hormones or support the symptoms we may experience throughout our cycle. So as you're tracking and taking note of the symptoms you experience, you may be able to modify your diet to help support your body in that way. So that's what this hack is all about. And so with the follicular and ovulation phase, so if we go back to this slide, the follicular phase, so after your period and then ovulation, it's normal to feel a reduction in hunger. So this is actually a great time to either intermittent fast or start a diet. And this is also a great phase to focus on nutrient dense foods and then estrogen detoxification. Because if we go back to this slide, when we're in that follicular and ovulation phase, our hormones are slowly increasing, then they peak. And so we really want to provide it with nutrient dense foods to help build up those hormones. And then if you're someone who struggles with estrogen dominance like symptoms, so really supporting the release of estrogen from the body by adding in those fiber rich foods can be super beneficial. So in general, during this phase, it's a great time to add in those fiber rich foods, which could include leafy greens, starchy vegetables, whole grains, fruits. But if you want to get more specific, in that follicular phase, you can add in some fermented foods like sauerkraut, kimchi, broccoli sprouts, vitamin C rich foods, avocado, ground flaxseed is a great one. And then in ovulation, lentils, oats, asparagus, sunflower seeds, or eggs. Versus in the luteal menstruation phase, so we go back to this slide, after ovulation and then while you're on your period, it's normal to notice an increase in hunger, at least in that luteal phase. And that's because estrogen and serotonin levels drop, which are natural appetite suppressants, and then progesterone is increasing, which increases our hunger, but it also increases our metabolism, which is awesome. And so during this phase, it's normal to crave also carbs more, and that helps support progesterone. And so it's a great time to focus on those warming foods, especially as we enter our menstruation, our period time. But if you want to get more specific on the foods, we really want to prioritize those anti-inflammatory foods, especially if you're someone who struggles with a lot of cramps. So we really want to be able to minimize that with anti-inflammatory foods like colorful fruits and veggies, herbs, spices, omega-3 rich foods. And if you want to be more specific, in that luteal phase, you can add in leafy greens, dark chocolate. I recommend 70% or greater, but berries, salmon, ginger. And then menstruation, so while you're on your period, pumpkin seeds, turmeric, cinnamon, high quality protein, and fruit. So if you really start to track your cycle, you can start to ask yourself, how can I support my hormones based off where I'm at or the symptoms I'm experiencing? And I want to share another client experience. So Karen said that learning about the different phases of my cycle combined with tracking my cycle has changed my life. I always wondered why sometimes I felt randomly tired or even sad. I've even had times where I felt more social and fun than other days. Our body speaks to us through our hormones, and I no longer dread the day my period comes. Instead, I take the time to reflect and take care of my body and all the amazing things that it does for me. Since I began tracking my cycle, I can now adjust my diet and workout routine to give my body what it needs to feel its best. I can also predict when my energy will be low and plan ahead by allowing myself to rest more. I wish more women knew the benefits of tracking their cycle because it sure changed the way that I view my body and it changed the way that I live my life, which I love. And that's what I would love for you to experience as well. So that's why I'm sharing these hacks with you. Now let's talk about hack number 4, which is called fit and flow training. So learning how to modify your training to align with the different phases of your cycle. And so everyone is different, but a very important question to ask yourself is, what's your ultimate goal? Do you have a fitness goal in mind? Because if so, staying consistent is so important. So I'll share some tips on how to keep your hormones healthy while you focus on those fitness goals. But in general, a great focus could be hitting those running PRs in the first half, so in that follicular phase, and hitting your lifting PRs in the second half, so in that luteal phase. You may notice that you just feel extra strong during that phase. And so if you're able to modify your training cycle based off where you're at, you can really schedule hitting those PRs based off your fluctuations of your hormones. That's how I personally recommend you approach it. But again, I'm gonna share my experience, and I'm gonna share tips on how to keep your hormones healthy based off your cycle, because again, you don't have to stop working out for a week just because you're on your period. Instead, I always recommend women self-auto-regulate based off how they're feeling, because every cycle may feel different based off how stressed they were, how well they slept. So you don't have to just stop just because, oh, I'm about to start my period, I have to go on a walk or do Pilates. Instead, you want to be mindful of, okay, maybe I'm feeling a little extra tired. So instead of trying to hit a lifting PR or hit squat heavy, I'm still going to squat, but maybe I'm just going to go a little bit lighter. So you want to give it your best, but your best can shift based off how you're feeling that day. And so I'm going to share my example. So for me, during my heavy lifting era and my training for a marathon era, I kept my hormones healthy. So my cycle was great. It was regular. I actually had my hormones tested shortly after this, and everything was great. But how I did this was one, and at this time, I didn't actually track my cycle. So there were days where I felt weaker, tired, and I was so frustrated with myself because I didn't understand why I felt unmotivated. And now I know, oh, I was just in a certain phase of my cycle. Or there's times where I felt so strong and it was awesome. And so now I know because of my hormones. And so at that time, I didn't know that. But now I do. And so now I'm trying to help you. So that way, when you're working out, if you do feel weaker or unmotivated or more tired, there's nothing wrong with you. You're probably just at that phase of your cycle. So if you know where you're at in your cycle and you go based off how you're feeling, you can modify based off where you're at. And again, depending on your specific goal, consistency is key. So this is why I want you to be mindful of that, and also be mindful of recovery, because that's literally the key when it comes to keeping your hormones healthy and still hitting those fitness goals as women. And so when it comes to recovery, we want to make sure we're fueling properly. So we're eating enough calories. So when I was lifting heavy, I was eating around 2,000 to 2,500 calories a day. When I was training for my marathon, I was eating over 3,000 calories. And this was rough because at that time I was 100% plant-based. So towards the end of my marathon training, I had to add in junk food just to get the calories in, just because I needed that to sustain my workouts. But we want to make sure we're eating enough. Also protein, fats, carbs, also antioxidant rich foods, because working out is a stress on the body. It can increase inflammation. It's helpful inflammation, but it can also increase inflammation. And drinking enough water. And if we're drinking enough water, we also make sure that we're adding in electrolytes, minerals back in, just so our body can actually absorb the water. Also, we want to prioritize managing our stress, because working out is a stress on our body. So if you're already super stressed out and now you're trying to add in this fitness goal, it can just over stress out your body, which can lead to those hormonal imbalances. So you want to add in daily stress management, which can look like meditation, mindfulness. I like to journal. I like to go for walks. I like to spend time in nature, but whatever that looks like for you, anything that helps bring self-awareness to where you're at and adding something in daily. You can also do cold or hot therapy. For me, cold stresses me out. So for me, I could be in a sauna all day. I love that. So go based off what works best for you. Also, prioritizing sleep. Sleep is crucial when it comes to healthy hormones. So I always recommend an evening routine and staying consistent, and then building up your environment for success. So making sure it's pitch black, it's nice and cool, around 68 degrees Fahrenheit. And so why I recommend an evening routine is because it can take time for our brain to process our day. So if you have an evening routine, it allows your brain, one, to know, okay, she's making tea, so she's probably getting ready for bed. Also, while you're doing it and you're in a more mindful practice while you do your evening routine, it can help allow your body to just process the day. So when you actually go to sleep, your body can fall asleep. Versus if you just go from watching TV or doing something and then go straight to bed, your mind still has to process that. So it can take you a while, even though you're laying in bed, to actually hit that deep sleep. So I always recommend an evening routine, and it doesn't have to be anything crazy. And then also, this is a great time to add in supplementation. So anything that can help with inflammation, anything can help with our hydration, so electrolytes. Protein powders is a great option. I really like the Organifi protein. That's the one I use. It's plant-based. Or stress management. And so this can help with, or this can include like adaptogens. Again, I also like the Organifi Sunrise to Sunset bundle, just because it helps target different aspects, which I really liked. But supplementation can be helpful. You can get a lot of nutrients from food, but if you're hitting a specific fitness goal and you have a crazy life schedule or you're stressed, this is where supplements can be your best friend. So again, if you have a fitness goal and you have to train, you have to be consistent, really take in consideration, one, auto-regulate based off where you're at, but also your recovery. Really focus on nourishing your body so that way your hormones can stay healthy during that intense workout throughout any phase of your cycle. But if you don't have a specific fitness goal in mind, you can do the cycle syncing method. There's no research behind this, but it does align with where you're at with your hormones. So if you just want to move your body every day, you can go based off where your hormones are at. So in the follicular phase, you can add in some running, cardio classes, group fitness classes. When you're in that ovulation phase, you can do some HIIT, spin class, boot camp, yoga sculpt. Enter that luteal phase, you can do some strength training, Pilates, and then as you get closer to your period, you can add some walking. And then when you're on your period, you can do some walking, active rest, light weights, yoga, things like that. So depending on your goals, you can do something kind of like this, or if you do have a specific fitness goal, again, consistency is key, you can use the tips that I shared earlier. So now let's talk about hack number 5, which is called selecting the key hormones. This is a great hack for anyone who feels overwhelmed or who has a lot going on. It's learning to be selective on which hormones you put more energy towards to get the most bang for your buck. But before we talk about hack number 5, it is important to talk about the endocrine system. So our endocrine system includes all the different hormones. So when someone online says hormonal imbalance, you really want to ask yourself what hormone, what's out of balance, because there's so many different hormones that we want to take in consideration. And these hormones can influence each other. So when it comes to our sex hormones specifically, so our menstrual cycle, there's two different axes that we want to prioritize, the HPA axis and the OAT axis. So HPA stands for hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal. And then the OAT axis stands for ovaries, adrenals, and thyroid. So we want to take into consideration these two axes when it comes to our sex hormonal health. But we really want to be mindful that these hormones can influence each other. And this is important because when we look at the hormone pyramid, I did put lifestyle at the bottom because lifestyle is important when it comes to hormonal health. But insulin and cortisol are also super important. So if you're someone who has a lot going on and you feel stressed, prioritizing these two hormones can help keep the other hormones healthy. So with insulin, this helps balance your blood sugar. Cortisol helps with set stress hormones. So you want stress management to help with cortisol. Both are super helpful and beneficial, but when we have too much of it, it can lead to a hormonal imbalance. So if you prioritize blood sugar management and managing your stress, there is a really good chance that you're going to keep your other hormones healthy. And so I'll explain why. So when it comes to hormones, our body makes hormones through cholesterol. So just a side note, we need cholesterol. We need healthy fats because without cholesterol, we can't make these hormones. And I actually had a client test for this. So I had a client show this exact situation. So she's been on a low-fat diet for a while. And she got hormones tested, and we saw that she has low estrogen, low progesterone, low testosterone, as well as her blood work showed low cholesterol. And so for her, we're really working on increasing her fat intake to help bring those levels up. But I just want to share that here because it's common to go low fat, especially for women who want to lose weight. I feel like it's less popular now, but it's still, I hear sometimes women go low fat. So I just want to make sure we note that we need healthy fats because of cholesterol. Because with cholesterol, we need it to make progesterone, we need it to make cortisol, we need it to make DHEA, which is also needed for testosterone, and also the estrogen. So it is very important. And so if we look at these pathways here, if we are eating a balanced diet, we're moving our body, we're managing our stress, all those things, it keeps these hormones healthy. And so if we go back to this pyramid here, with our insulin and cortisol, so insulin again is that blood sugar management, if we are not managing our blood sugar for women, it can potentially increase our testosterone levels, and it can lead to those androgen excess type symptoms. So it could lead to cystic acne, male pattern baldness, facial hair, and things like that. So if we're not balancing our blood sugar, specifically for women who struggle with PCOS, it could lead to unwanted symptoms. We really want to make sure that we're keeping that healthy. And then when it comes to cortisol, if we're under a lot of stress, our body will prioritize making that cortisol. So it will shift the balance between progesterone and estrogen. So if you're someone who's under a lot of stress, you may notice that for that cycle or maybe the next 3 cycles, because sometimes it can take about 3 months to actually see the symptoms, that you experience estrogen dominance-like symptoms. So maybe you experience breast tenderness or you just feel heavy, painful periods, whatever it may be. It could be because of cortisol. So if you balance your cortisol levels, it can help keep that progesterone estrogen balance. And also if you balance your blood sugar, it can help keep your testosterone levels within range so we don't experience those unwanted symptoms. So again, if you're under a lot of stress or you just feel overwhelmed, ask yourself, how can I just prioritize balancing my blood sugar, which could include eating meals that include a protein, fat, or carb, specifically fiber-rich carbs, or how can I add some stress management techniques to my everyday? I always recommend at least 5 to 10 minutes dedicated to a specific stress management method, just so you can really train that parasympathetic system. So yeah, that's hack number 5. Now let's talk about our bonus hack, which is called utilizing functional labs to heal imbalances. Now, with social media, I do feel like it's gaining more popularity around learning that there are functional labs that we can do to help test these hormones. But I still find that women don't realize that this is an option. So I want to talk about this because with this hack, if you are able to test your hormones, we can see what's going on. We can see the pathways. We can really address the issue. And so what's cool about doing labs is that we can address common period problems. And ones that I commonly work with or hear about are PMS, PMDD, mid-cycle or ovulation pain, headaches, migraines, heavier light periods, short or irregular cycles, vaginal dryness, infections, PCOS, endometriosis. There's other ones too, like infertility or low libido, things like that. But we can really address the root cause. And so the best approach is testing, personalized plan, and then consistency, because it can take 3 to 6 months to notice those changes, because with hormones it can take time. And a test that I use in my clinical practice is called the Dutch Complete. There are different options, but this is the most popular one. And I love it because it's an easy at-home test and it's done using urine samples and we can see different metabolites. And so I'm going to go over the test results from one of my clients so you can visually see the results that you can get or the information you can get from your results and see if this is a great test for you based off where you're at with your symptoms or how long you've been struggling with something. And also share different client results so you can see the different you can see the variation between the results. So you can see how we can really personalize a plan based off the results. I'm excited to share this information because I think it's super cool. So I hope you find it super cool. And I'm going to be going over 3 different clients' results so you can visually see how different they can be. So these 3 clients actually came to me with similar complaints and symptoms. So they all 3 struggled with low energy, sleep, and struggling to lose weight. And so I'll walk you through how different our approach can be based off what's going on. So with client number 1, she also was struggling with massive food cravings right before bed. She said she would always have to have chocolate or cereal. And when she was quote unquote good and didn't eat those foods, sometimes she would wake up around 1 or 2 a.m. just to go eat those foods. She said that she almost felt like an obsession for her. She also was struggling with things like cystic acne, facial hair growth. And so we definitely want to address all that. And so going through the test results, I'm going to be using the Dutch Plus just because with the Dutch Plus, we do get that cortisol awakening response, which includes these 2 dots here. And so with the Dutch Plus, you do saliva and urine. So we get a little bit more markers. But I want to share this because with the Dutch Complete, your test results will look similar besides that cortisol awakening response. So depending on someone's situation, the Dutch Plus may be more beneficial. But for most women, I think the Dutch Complete is a perfectly great option. So when you get your results, how we want to look at this is the first page is a summary. So we want to ideally be between these 2 yellow stars. That's the premenopausal range. This purple is the postmenopausal range. And then we have an overview on estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, our adrenals. So we see our cortisol pattern and the different metabolites. So for this client in particular, she has high estrogen, low progesterone, high testosterone. And something with progesterone that you want to be mindful of is that you want to make sure you're testing in the appropriate window, because if you test too early or too late, it may influence this value. And so for this client in particular, we did see that she did test within the appropriate range. So it was just on the lower end range. And then with the cortisol, we want to be between these 2 black lines and we want to follow a similar pattern. So for this client, she's following the similar pattern and is within those 2 black lines. But we can see that her metabolized cortisol is on the high end range. On the second page, we can see different metabolites and their values. But I like to look at page 3 because it's just more visually appealing. So we get similar information on the previous page. But so on the third page, we can see progesterone, which is the combination of the beta and alpha form. Those 2 averaged out gives you the progesterone levels. We see our estrogens. We have E1, E2, E3, the different pathways. Also, this is phase 1 detox, phase 2 is here, and then phase 3 is actually in your gut. And then we can see our androgens. So if we remember on the previous slide, we can see how DHEA is needed to make testosterone, which can convert into estrogen. Same with the other metabolites. And then we can also look at this fan gauge here. So for this client in particular, she was struggling with androgen excess type symptoms, which makes sense because she has high estrogen or high testosterone. And she's also favoring the 5-alpha reductase activity. And if we scroll up, she also has high 5-alpha DHT. And so that's something we really wanted to work on. And when it comes to estrogen, we want to be mindful of the pathways. So ideally, we want to favor the green pathway because that's protective. The red is less ideal because it can lead to DNA damage. And then the blue pathway can be more estrogenic. So how we know which way we're favoring is by looking at these values here. So ideally, we want to be between 16 and 8% for the green, 7.5 to 11% for the red, and 13.30% for the blue. So this client is within range. Even though she has high estrogen levels, which we definitely want to work on, she is at least favoring the green pathway, which is awesome. And her methylation is pretty good. And so that's the third page. And if we scroll down, we can see our adrenals. So we can see the metabolites and then the values. And similar as before, we can see a more visually appealing page where we can kind of put it all together. So for this client in particular, she does have high melatonin levels. So we want to be mindful of like, did this client take a melatonin supplement or melatonin-rich foods before taking this test? And for her, she did not. And so sometimes when you have high melatonin levels, it can indicate inflammation in the gut. And she also has other things that we're working on. So she has high melatonin levels. Her total DHA production is within range, high end but within range. Her metabolized cortisol is high. And we can look at this fan gauge here. So free cortisol metabolites and then cortisone. So your body, when you produce a lot of cortisol, can be helpful in the short term because it helps keep you awake, but sometimes it can lead to issues. So if your body, for her, it's not an issue, but it can get converted into cortisone and just makes it so you would feel a little more tired. And I'll show that in the second example. But we can also see the pattern of free cortisol and cortisone. So it follows a similar pattern. And this can go back and forth. So just because your body produces, is favoring cortisol, it can go back and forth. So we want to be mindful of that. So with the organic acid test, we can see different markers. So we can see some B vitamins, some metabolites for dopamine, inflammation, so oxidative stress. So we really want to take in consideration everything and then create a personalized plan. So for this client in particular, we took consideration her Dutch test results. She also had blood work, which came out fine, and that's actually why she was excited to do this test, because she was like, my blood work comes out fine and my doctors don't know why I'm struggling, but now I can see it. Now I can see why she's struggling. But what was cool is that within 1 month, so 4 to 6 weeks of working together, and she was able to lose 10 pounds. And she was shocked because she was like, this is the easiest I've ever lost the 10 pounds. Because what we actually did, because this client, she was actually intermittent fasting unintentionally, just because she was a busy mom and a teacher. So she just didn't have time to eat during the day. So she would try to eat her first meal at lunch, and she would try to keep it low calorie throughout the day because she was trying to lose weight, which was adding more stress. She also was doing high intensity exercise. And for her, based off her results, we would not want to do that. So we actually stopped working out and instead replaced that with walking or yoga. So something more gentle. And then of course, we'd also worked on diets because we wanted to increase those anti-inflammatory foods. But yeah, she was able to lose 10 pounds. She also, the swelling in her face went down. Her cravings were gone. That's the thing that she was also really shocked about. She was like, this is the longest I've gone without eating chocolate. And I don't eat cereal before bed because I don't want it. And she's like, I'm sleeping throughout the night. So it's just really cool to see when we see the imbalance and how we can make very personalized changes, and then we get those positive results. So I always love that. So that's client number 1. Client number 2, again, she had similar results or symptoms as client number 1, where she was struggling with her weight, sleep, and energy. So with this client, we can see that she has high estrogen, but her progesterone and testosterone are within range. She's struggling with her cortisol waking response. And so that's something we wanted to work on, is addressing why is her cortisol spiking at night? And then her different metabolites are here. So if we go down to this page, we can also see that. So for example, her E1 is low, high. So we also want to take that, of course, into consideration, but I wanted to highlight the methylation activity. So for this client in particular, we wanted to support methylation. And then with her metabolites, she also was favoring the 5-alpha reductase activity. And I also wanted to highlight, for this client in particular, her body was converting her cortisol into cortisone. So she was always tired. So that's something also we wanted to address. And she had, we needed to support her B vitamins. So for client number 3, same symptoms, struggling with sleep, her energy levels, and weight loss. And she actually was feeling frustrated because she would go to her doctors and they were like, you're fine, but she did not feel fine. So this is another client example where she did get blood work done, but everything came out fine until we did the Dutch test, and we can see that there's some things that we could improve on. So for this client, she had normal ranges of estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, even though her progesterone was on the lower end, which doesn't surprise me, once you see her cortisol pattern. So for her value is on the very low end range. So this is something that we really focused on. And she also was struggling with respiratory issues, so a very bad asthma. And I'll share what we actually did with her and her results, but something we wanted to address. But everything else, for the most part, especially methylation, wasn't terrible. So for this client in particular, we really wanted to address this issue. And based off our consultation calls, we realized that she has a high histamine intolerance. So we really prioritized a low histamine diet, supplementation. And what was really cool was that her doctor actually reduced her asthma medication during, usually for her, the worst season, so springtime. So that was a cool result of really addressing her histamine, which helped with her asthma. But also she sent me a picture before and after of her belly, because she tends to hold weight around her midsection. So she was excited that she was starting to notice a difference. She's also training for a half marathon. So it's just really cool. Another thing that for her, the biggest thing was that normally she would say around 7 or 8 or specifically 9 p.m. She was like, once that time frame came, she's like, I was always exhausted. She was like, it was so hard to keep my eyes open. Usually I would pass out before then. And then one day she was sitting on the couch and she realized that she was up till 10 p.m. and felt fine. So that was huge for her. So anyways, I just wanted to share 3 different client results. So you can see how sometimes individuals can have similar symptoms, but what's going on can be completely different and our approach will be different. And so I hope you found that helpful, but let's go back to the slides. So with client number 1, we really focus on the estrogen detox, increasing your progesterone, decreasing your testosterone, balancing your blood sugar, and reducing inflammation. Versus client number 2, we focus on improving her cortisol awakening response, reducing that cortisol spike at night, estrogen detox, supporting methylation, and her B12 levels. And then with client number 3, we focus on improving her adrenal insufficiency, improving her histamine intolerance, and improving her gut health. And so I hope by seeing these different examples, you can see how we can really personalize someone's approach based off what's going on, what needs support, what is out of balance. And so that's why I love the Dutch test, but functional labs in general, is because we can really assess what is going on and how can we personalize someone's approach. And so if you're someone who's been struggling for a while, I highly recommend taking or considering doing the Dutch test. But also, if you don't want to do functional labs right now, some things that you can do is adding in some healthy hormone, lifestyle, diet tricks, following the hacks in this masterclass to really see if you notice a difference. Because you may be able to notice a difference just by following the information in this masterclass. But if you follow everything and nothing seems to work, that's when maybe you can add in the functional labs. But some healthy hormone tips include, for example, for estrogen, gut health, increasing our fiber intake. Fermented foods may be beneficial depending, for example, that one client that had histamine intolerance, that would not work for her. But for you, if you can tolerate fermented foods, that can be a great option because we actually have bacteria in our gut that can help with estrogen. We also want to support methylation, that COMT enzyme. And then for some individuals, adding in supplements like DIM can help with excess estrogen. And then also avoiding xenoestrogens, which we can find in different products. And then with progesterone, we can increase our B vitamins, specifically B5, B6, B12, zinc, vitamin C, healthy fats. We can focus on stress management, and then Vitex could be a great option. And then with testosterone, we can focus on balancing our blood sugar, increasing our omega-3s, our zinc, or adding in different supplements like inositol or saw palmetto. And then with cortisol, we can really focus on that stress-reducing activities and also exposing our eyes to natural sunlight throughout the day, when you wake up and throughout the day. And that's because our body can tell what time it is based off the sun rays, and during the day there's more blue light. That's why it's also helpful to add in blue light blocking glasses at night, because our devices can emit that blue light, which could possibly keep us up at night. And we really want to focus on reducing our cortisol at night because cortisol can impact melatonin, which we need to get that restful sleep. And so we can also add in different adaptogens to help with our cortisol levels. And so you can try adding in some of these healthy habits. But if nothing seems to work, this is where I really, again, recommend functional labs. I love the Dutch Complete, but we can also consider stool testing. Sometimes it's helpful to do the stool test instead or start with the stool test. 2 of my favorite include the GIFX or the GI map. And so if you've been struggling for a while, I highly encourage you to get support. I would love to support you on this journey, especially if you've been struggling with PMS, heavy, painful periods, migraines, headaches, mood swings, feeling bloated, low libido, weight gain, poor sleep, infertility, whatever it may be. I highly recommend you join Femtility so I can support you, or book a free consultation call where we can see your specific situation. I can see if maybe this program is a good fit or provide resources. And again, if you've been trying everything and nothing seems to work, you've been following the different health influencers, random hormone balancing supplements, different diet trends, even if your blood work comes out fine, you don't feel fine, there might be something else going on. Or you've just spent hours on Google or Facebook pages and nothing seems to be working. I highly encourage you to take a personalized approach. And again, join Femtility so I could support you on your journey. But if you have any questions, feel free to scan this QR code. It'll take you to a Google page where you can submit your questions or type that in your browser or email them to hello@femtility.co. And I just want to take the time to thank you for taking your time to watch this masterclass. I truly hope it was beneficial and helpful. And if you have any questions throughout, or if any questions came up throughout this masterclass, feel free to send them my way. Or if you want me to create different masterclasses based off topics that came up, definitely let me know. I'd love to do that. And if you loved it and you post on social media, it would mean the world to me if you tag me so I can see, or just send me your feedback. I'd love to hear it. But anyways, I just want to say thank you, and I wish you the best on your health and fertility journey.